Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Ayin Dalid 74 in Kiddushin. And before we're going to have Rashi, we're going to have Tosos. We got a lot of stuff to cover. So let's get right into it. And in that regard, I will note, I don't know, no Bloomberg. But all right, we'll see who we have. Okay, so but before we get started, Charlie, no, I don't think so. Any Greenberg either. So Charlie asked a great question yesterday because we said that the Gemara told us that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, namely that a kohen, a convert, is allowed to marry a mamzer, that a mamzeret, a female mamzer. So why did the Gemara need to tell us that? Because we have a general principle that when Rabbi Yossi disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda, and I think also with other individuals, so then the halacha is like him. And so as a result, why should the Gemara tell us that? But the key is to remember that there were three statements in the Mishnah. There was the statement of Rabbi Yossi, namely that a convert is allowed to marry a mamzeret. There was a statement of Rabbi Yehuda who said that a convert is not allowed to marry a mamzeret. And then there was a last statement of that brisa. And as you read it, it seems like it was a continuation of Rabbi Yehuda's statement, namely that a convert is allowed to marry a bas kohen, a kohenet. And so I believe that the explanation as to why specifically we would say here that the halacha was like Rabbi Yossi is because the Gemara doesn't actually begin with that. The first statement that the Gemara begins with is to say that the halacha, not that it's just like Rabbi Yossi, but to say that the halacha is like the law that a convert is allowed to marry a bas kohen. It is only after is saying that it says v'hilchasa. This is the middle of Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. It says v'hilchasa ger muter b'kohenet. The first comment is that the halacha is that the ger is allowed to marry a kohenet. And so it's saying that the halacha is like an aspect of what seems to be Rabbi Yehuda's statement in our Mishnah. And therefore, it has to also tell us, because if it only told us, if it didn't say anything, then we would only know that a ger is allowed to marry a mamzeret. We wouldn't know that the convert is also allowed to marry a kohenet. And if it only told us that the fact that a ger is allowed to marry a kohenet, and we wanted to just rely on the principle of the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi in all situations, we wouldn't necessarily know that, because the fact that we said that the halacha is like the second statement of Rabbi Yehuda, we might have thought that maybe it means that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda's first statement as well, and that the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi. And so therefore, first we need to say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda's second statement, namely that good ger muter b'kohenet. And then once we say that, well, now we have to clarify that in fact the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi as well, umuter b'mamzeret. So that's the way I read it, and that's the way I think. I mean, again, this is all my own svara. I'm sure that somebody says that, but I wasn't able to find it yesterday in the places that I checked. But as I was thinking about it, I'm fairly confident that that is in fact the answer to the question. So excellent question. I hope that that feels satisfactory, and that we can go on to the next stop. So turning to today's stop, we are continuing with to discuss ancestry and legitimacy. So we concluded yesterday with a series of examples where someone's immediate testimony is valid, even if their later testimony is not. And one of those cases involved a midwife. And so we pick up at the end of the 13th line from the bottom of Ayin Gimel Amabet, and we pick up with another time we trust a midwife. So Tana Rabbanan, Ne'emenes Chaya Lomar Zek Kohen V'Zeh Levi. A midwife is believed to say that this child is a Kohen or this child is a Levi, Zen Natin, Vizem Mamzer, this child is a Natin, this child is a Mamzer. Again, Natin is the group that effectively tricked the Jewish people into enabling them to convert, and then there's the Mamzer. So a child born out of an improper relationship. So and the Rashi here, second of the middle wide lines. They're not so once the lines get a little bit wider, it says Zeh Kohen v'Zeh Levi Nashim sheyaldu bebeit achat, that there was these women all had birth in the same house. And what happens? Ashes Cohen Vilevi Natin B'Mamzer, and there was 4 wives of 4 different people, and this woman who is helping them each give birth is able to say which child it goes with which family. So B'med Dvar Mamurim, when do we say that that's true? Shelo Kara Allah Shem Arar. That's as long as there was no challenge with respect to it. Aval Kara Allah Arar. But if some kind of challenge is raised, so then she would not be believed. So now, what kind of challenge are we talking about? Arar Demai. How many people are challenging her? Because Ilema Arar Chad v'Amar Rabbi Yochanan Ein Arar Pachas Mishnayim. We have a general rule that if you have, again, this is not somebody who says that not 2 people who come in and say that they know for a fact that this child is a mamzer, but it's 2 people who come in who say, we've heard that it has been said about this child that he's a mamzer, and so as a result, that's enough of a concern. That's a concern. That's a challenge. That's that makes a difference. But when you have fewer than 2 witnesses, namely 1 witness, well, then that's not considered any kind of challenge at all. Ella Trey, you need to have 2 witnesses. So maybe we'd say that this must deal with a challenge that involves 2 witnesses. But the Ibai Zema, you can also give another explanation. La'olam emalach arachad. Really, I could tell you that we're talking about 1 witness challenge. And why is it that we have? What about Rabbi Yochanan's statement? The Kiyama Rabbi Yochanan ein arapachad mishnayim hani mili hecha de isa chazaka de kashrus. That when Rabbi Yochanan said the challenge requires at least 2 witnesses, that's when there is a chazaka, a confirmed aspect to the legitimacy, when there's already been a known statement of legitimacy associated with the child. But when that doesn't exist, such as here, because we're just establishing the chazaka, we haven't actually created, the chazaka does not yet exist, so then chad nami mehem, even 1 will be believed to challenge, and I believe that is the way we actually paskin. So now that we've done that, we're now going to deal with 2 other very similar situations. 2 other very similar situations. One is a situation where the owner of merchandise sells something, and one is where a judge decides a case. So let's take a look at those 2 additional cases, because we're going to see that the structure is very similar. And indeed, it seems that this is a continuation of the Baraisa that we began with today. So we are now 1, 2, 3 lines up, beginning of the line on Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Bet. Neman Bal Mikach Lomar Lezeh Macharti v'Lezeh Ein Macharti. The owner of some produce is allowed to say and is believed to say that I sold this item to this particular person. So we have 2 people arguing. We'll say that their names are Mark and Stan, that they're arguing about whether or not I sold this particular pen to one of them. Each of them is saying that I sold it to them. And so we're going to say that I'm believed to say which one of them I actually sold it to. So when is this true that we're going to believe me in saying which of the people bought it? It's only when I'm still holding the pen. But if I'm no longer holding the pen, meaning that it's now in the possession of one of Mark or Stan, well, then presumably it's whoever's got it has got, as we say, possession is 9/10 of the law. Certainly a concept that we see similarly in halacha as well. And so now but why is this? Why is this? And here we're going to have a debate between Tosfos and Rashi. Why is it that we're going to believe the holder of the merchandise? So let's start with Rashi. End of the third to last line of all of the Rashis on the page. Bisman shemakcho biyado. In the time when he's got it in his hand. Duramya lelamida kshelo lachzer lo mizev ulahachzer lo damav. That of course he's got to be very careful as to I've got to be very careful that I give this pen to the right person. Because if I give it to the wrong person and I have to return that person's money, and I instead give the product to the person that I did not sell it to, that I'm going to be subject to the curse of Mishapara, that the one who paid back the generation of the flood with the flood and punished them, that God should similarly punish anybody who takes money saying that they're going to sell something and then goes back on the deal. That is the punishment. We'll see that. We're almost done with the Seder Nashim, and we're going to see that in Seder Nezikin, in Baba Metzia, but the point is we're introducing that concept now, and the concept is that you can't go back on a deal. If I were to actually have given the object, I can't go back on the deal even if I want to. But the rabbi said that just transferring the money does not complete a transaction. But they said that even though it doesn't complete a transaction, you go back on it, that's not appropriate behavior, and you deserve this kind of curse. So that's the story. So hold on just a second. Let me just this. And so as a result, we are going to say that that is Rashi's explanation. So the Rashi's explanation again is basically we're going to believe the seller because failure to deliver will result in a curse. Tosfos doesn't like that answer. We're going to start in the Tosfos. It's right opposite Tosfos Ri Hazaken, where it says kasha. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines. First word on the line on Ayin Gimel on Mebet in the Tosfos. First word on the line. Kasha demai yesh lanu lehamino tvei me'ed echad. Why should we believe this seller, namely me, more than a single witness, the Alma of the world? The Kavan she'ein mekcho biyado lo shayach lomar migo. The point is that when it's when it's not in his hand, so meaning let's assume that I had sold it already and it's no longer in my hand. Well, the point is that when it's not in my hand, I don't have this concept of migo. That migo, I have the ability to say something else and be believed. So believe me when I say this. Kedei lahamino lakain. And so therefore, lakain perish Rabbeinu Tam bisman shemakcho biyado va'azhu ne'eman mitam migo dematzi amar lo macharti o chazarti v'kanitav. That since the owner of the object, meaning I have the ability because I'm holding the object still, I can say that Stan may have bought it, but I returned the money, and I am holding the object because it's mine. Or I could say I don't even know what Stan's talking about, and Stan and Mark are talking about because they don't have any witnesses, and so as a result, I'm going to say that I can say that it's mine, and so as a result, since I would believe to say that the pen belongs to me, so then I'm going to be believed to say which one of Stan and Mark the pen is going to belong to. So now let's take a look at the next question that the Gemara asked, because Rashi and Tosfos are going to understand this question a little bit differently. So the next is Zuzi Miman Nakat. So 1 second, according to Rashi, why don't, even if I've already lost possession of the pen, I am holding possession of the money, why don't we just see who the money came from, and therefore I will, that will be the person who bought it. But according to Tosfos, would say slightly differently. No, the who gave the money? Let's take a look and see who gave the money, because even if I'm holding the pen, if it's clear who gave me the money, well, then I no longer have my migu. I no longer have the ability to say that believe me that it's mine, because I'm holding money, and that means that I sold it. So as a result, I would not be believed, and therefore I would lose the migu. So that's what the Gemara is asking according to Tosos. So lo tzricha denaka mitarvayu. So we're talking about where that I must have gotten money from both of them. V'amar chad, and one of Mark or Stan says midatai v'chad. I'm sorry, v'amar, and I'm saying chad midatai v'chad bal karchi. One of them gave it to me intentionally with my knowledge, meaning it was part of the deal, and one of them just threw the money to me and made me take it. V'lo yadia hey midato v'hei midato, and it's not known publicly which one is the one who gave it with consent and did it as part of a deal, and which one gave it without consent, without my consent. And so as a result, my testimony is crucial to determining which one of them actually bought the object. Okay, so that is case number 2. Case number 3, Ne'eman dayan lomar lezeh zakiti v'lezeh chayavti. If again, I'll be the judge, and Mark and Stan come to me with a case, and I say that I found in favor of one of them. So b'may dvarim amurim, when is it that I would be believed? Sheba'alei dinim omdim lefanav, as long as Stan and Mark are still in front of me. So but if they're not in front of me, I'm just one witness. Yes, I may have been the deciding judge in the case, but I am only one witness. That is not enough. Oh, the next is a kusuman nugget. Well, one second, why don't we just look to see? I wrote a judgment and I gave the judgment to the winning party. So why don't we see which of them is holding the judgment? So lo tzrika decree zuchusai who, that we're talking about a situation where the decree was ripped up, and so as a result, we can't possibly check as to who's got it. V'nedar v'nedaninhu. Well, one second. Why should we care about who I testify about? Let's just rejudge the case. So b'shuda d'dayane, we're talking about a situation where the case was decided by judicial discretion. So what does judicial discretion mean? So that's a complicated concept. So there's a debate between Rashi and Tosos here. We won't go through it inside, but we'll just note the following. Rashi says that basically we're talking about a situation where somebody gave a gift and then passes away. And so, and it turns out that they gave the gift to somebody named Tuvia. And there are 2 Tuvias that are in this guy's life, and they have the exact same distance of relationship. So therefore, we can't tell which of the Tuvias was intended. Well, in that situation, but basically Rashi says that the judge has the flexibility to say, look, I'm going to figure out which one the grantor of this gift actually was closer to, and therefore most likely was the one who was the one that the grantor intended the gift to go to. But Tosa says, no, that's too narrow a case, that there are some times where there is no ability to judge the matter. And as a result, the judges just have to come up with some conclusion. And in those situations, that's what we're talking about when we say Beshuda de Daini. It's talking about where the judges just basically use the concept of Hefker based in Hefker to say, we're going to decide, and it goes to one of them, even though it's impossible for us to make a certain decision. Yeah, no worries. Mark, you want to go downstairs? Okay. So Amar Rav Nachman. So now Rav Nachman says, so all right, so we've got now these 3 cases, and now we're continuing our discussion about who is believed regarding the identity of a firstborn. So Amar Rav Nachman Shlosha Ne'emanim al HaBechor, that there are 3 different kinds of people who are going to be believed when it comes to a firstborn. Eluhain Chaya. We have again the midwife. So again, the midwife was how we got to this topic, and so it's our continuing theme, so to speak. And so a midwife will be believed, and we'll see the timing associated with it in a moment. Chaya, Chaya, Vivimo, and then the father and the mother. So Chaya Alter, the midwife is believed only immediately, only at the very earliest moments. As we saw previously, she's believed as long either while she's in the room, before she leaves the room, or until she leaves the room, or as long as she's focused on this particular mother and this particular baby, as long as she doesn't turn her back on them. So that's the case of the midwife. Emo Kol Shiva, the mother is believed all the first 7 days of the baby's life, and Aviv La'olam, and the father is believed forever. Well, why is that? Well, that's going to be as we learned in the Brisa, Tanya. Yakir, the word Yakir, Yakirenu la'acherim, that it says that a child is going to be recognized. This pasuk is in Dvarim Parakaf Aleph pasuk Yud Zayin, and the plain meaning of the verse refers to the father's obligation to recognize his firstborn as the bechor, who's entitled to get his double portion. But the idea is that he is going to recognize him for others, meaning that he's going to say which of his children is the firstborn. So Mikan Amar Rabbi Yehuda Neman Adam Lomar Zebni Bechor, that this child, so Rabbi Yehuda says that that's why a parent is allowed to say that this is my first. A father is allowed to say that this is my firstborn, and Uchashem Sheneman Lomar Zebni Bechor Kach Neman Lomar Zeb Ben Grusha V'Zen Ben Chalutza. So too, a father is allowed to effectively taint his child by saying that this child is the son of a divorcee or a chalutza, and therefore a halal. But the Chachamim say he's not believed. And when we say he's not believed, it's only with respect to the second statement, with respect to when he says that my son's a divorce, this is a son of a divorcee or a son of a chalutza, because in that situation, you are not helping your son. You are harming him. And so as a result, they're going to say that you need to have 2 witnesses in order to confirm that status. But without that, that's not going to be enough. And so, but when it comes to to say a child is a firstborn, well, then the father is sufficient. Okay. So now we head back to our Mishnah. And in our Mishnah, we said that Abba Shaul would call a Shituki by the name Beduki. And so now the Gemara is going to explain the situation and tell us, give us some additional details. So, oh, sorry about the Papa. Hopefully I've gotten it cleared now. Okay, so Abba Shaul hayakora l'shtuki beduki. So Abba Shaul again would call, quoting our Mishnah, a shtuki, one who doesn't know who his father is, a beduki. Now, meaning obviously livdok is to check. So what kind of my beduki? What does it mean that he's going to check? So if you're trying to tell me that a mother will be believed if she had relations with a legitimate child, well, come on. That we already understand that position exists. Rabban Gamliel, that's just like Rabban Gamliel. Tanina Chada Zimna, because we already learned in a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Ketubot, first paragraph of Ketubot, I believe, Mishnah Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Haita me'uberet v'amru la ma tivo shel ubarzeh. If there's a woman who's pregnant and we ask her what's the story, where did you get this baby? Amra lahem meish ploni v'chohenhu. I got it from this fellow and he's a kohen. Rabbi Gamliel v'Rabbi Eliezer omrim ne'menes. Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer says she's believed. Rabbi Yoshua omer lo mipia anu chayin. We're not going to live based on her life or her mouth. So as a result, we're not going to believe her. But Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, and Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, halakha Rabbi Gamliel. The halakha follows Rabbi Gamliel. So why do I need Abba Shaul to tell me that we're going to ask the mother? Why? We already know that we asked the mother based on this Mishnah in Ketubot. So no, the point is that actually each statement is going to teach us something, because Chada lahakshir, but Rabbi Gamliel tells us that in fact she is going to be still kosher to marry a Kohen after she had this out of wedlock baby, because having an out of wedlock baby, unlike being a divorcee or a chalutza, does not make one unfit to marry a Kohen. So as a result, by her testifying who the baby's from, she's not going to undermine her own chazaka of being kosher to marry a Kohen. And one is going to declare, and Abba Shaul is going to tell us that not only is she kosher, but her daughter is kosher, meaning that even though we don't actually have any confirmed identity of the father, we are going to believe her to say, to allow her daughter to have a chazaka of being kosher. Well, that makes sense if we're going to go according to the one who understands Rabbi Gamliel as saying that she is only qualifying herself, but she's not going to qualify her daughter. But but according to the one who says that when she makes herself fit, she's also making her daughter fit. Abba Shaul, my asalash marina. We still have our question. What does Abba Shaul come to teach us? The Abba Shaul adifa midivrei midrabban Gamliel. No, we can say that Abba Shaul is saying something even more than Rabban Gamliel. De'ima hasam, because if I were to only have the statement of Rabban Gamliel, haba amina hasam, I might have thought that in that case, derov ksher mitzvah, most of the people that she could have this extramarital affair with, that she could have relations with, would not cause her to be prohibited to a Kohen, because an unmarried woman is able to have, if she has relations with basically any man, as long as that man is not a halal or a variety of different categories, which we will be talking about, I believe, tomorrow. So then she's still going to be able to marry a Kohen. But and so maybe we would only say in such a situation, that's where we're going to allow her to say that she has a chazaka of kashrus and her daughter has a chazaka of kashrus. But in a place or in a situation where most people in the city cannot have relations with her, and Rashi here explains, if we take a look, 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, we're talking from the bottom, 12, 15, 18, 20, about 21, 22 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi. What's that situation? Kigon Penuya, like an unmarried woman. Verov Ha'ir, Misian L'Ka'una. And if she had relations with most people in the city, she could still marry a Kohen. But if most of them are actually puzzled to her, Kagon Arusa, Vihio Meretz min ha'arus, and she now tells everybody that, you know who was the one who impregnated me? It's the one that I'm about to marry. It's the one that I have already done Arison with, and I just haven't done Nisuin. So, O Penuya ve'ein rov ha'ir Messian Lacuna, or if it's somebody who is living in a city that is filled with chalalim, and so as a result, most of the people are not people that once she has relationships with, she would be still able to marry a Kohen, or her daughter would still be able to marry a Kohen. So as a result, in those situations, maybe we would say we don't believe the mother, or maybe we'll believe the mother only with respect to herself, but we won't believe the mother with respect to her daughter. And so as a result, that's what Abba Shaul is coming to teach us, that even in that situation, I might say not, and therefore tzricha. Therefore, we need Abba Shaul, and therefore we're going to be in a good situation. And Amarava, halacha ka Abba Shaul. The halacha is like Abba Shaul, that we believe a woman to say who impregnated her, even if most situations would be puzzle. We will believe her, even if she says that it's the kosher person that she had relations with.
It would have been unusual for the halakha to follow Rabban Gamliel it's in a dispute with Rabbi Yehoshua.
That's interesting to note. So it must be, well, first of all, we had Rabbi Eliezer joining him, and now we have Abba Shaul sort of piling on top. So as a result, that is almost certainly part of what's going on. Although it's interesting to note that Rabbi Yehuda had Rav Yehuda, the Amora, in the student of Shmuel, said that the halacha was like Rabbi Gamliel even before that. So, and again, that would be the reason why, because you're absolutely, to the extent that we don't usually paskin like him, that we would need actually to have a statement. Okay, so now we're going to continue. Our Mishnah continues the discussion of lineage and who can marry whom. So again, so let's take a look. So kol ha'arusin. Now this first line in our Mishnah, I'm going to just give it the very simplest explanation, but we'll see that it can't mean that. But kol ha'arusin, kol ha'asurin lavo b'kahal, anyone who's prohibited to marry a Kohen, Levi, or Yisrael. So all of them, mutarim lavo zeh, all of them are allowed to marry one another. Rabbi Yehuda oser. Rabbi Yehuda says no, they can't marry one another. Rabbi Eliezer omer vadan bevadan mutar, that when you have categories that are definitive, that are definitely problem, that are definitely problematic, so then they're allowed to marry one another. However, vadan b'sveikan, usveikan b'vadan, usveikan b'sveikan. But if you have one of those situations where somebody in the marriage has an uncertain prohibition, usher. Basically, they can't marry anybody in any category other than their own, and maybe they can't even marry their own category. We'll have to see in the Gemara. The Eluhein Hasveikos, and who are these uncertain ones that we're talking about? Shtuki, that's the one again who we're unsure as to who the father is. Asufi, the one who's uncertain as to both parents and who's a foundling. Mukuti, and a kuti, where we're unsure whether or not their conversion was is effectively a valid conversion. So, my kol asurin lavo bakal. What do we mean when we say anyone is prohibited? Who's that referring to? Okay, so we're going to have 5 different possibilities. So, if you want to say that it's the 4 categories that we're saying that you can't, that a regular person can't marry, well, hatanale resha, we already learned that in the first part of the Mishnah, meaning in the opening Mishnah of this parak, because we said mamzere unasine ushisuki vasufi maturin lavo zebazeh. They're allowed to marry each other, but they're not allowed to marry a Kohen, a Yisrael, or a Kohen Levi or Yisrael. So that statement, which of course was how I was translating it in our Mishnah, and is certainly the way you would want to start, that doesn't make any sense because it doesn't work. Visu, and moreover, Rabbi Yehuda Oser, Rabbi Yehuda is going to say that it's forbidden. Ahai. So what is he saying is forbidden? If you're going to tell me, well, he's saying that you can't, that when he said that it's prohibited, that they can't marry each other, it's talking about where you have a vadai and a suffix situation. But Hamidigtani Seva, that is what Rabbi Eliezer says, because Rabbi Eliezer Omer vadan bevadan mutter, vadan besveikan 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 asur, that all the other situations are prohibited. So McLeod to Rabbi Yehuda lo svirale, and that implies that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with him. So the Chitim and Rabbi Yehuda oser agar ager b'mamzeret, and if you're going to say, well, maybe we can. So now we've got and so this is not necessarily possibility number 2, but maybe you could even call it possibility number 2, in which case we'll have 6 possibilities. But if you were to say maybe Rabbi Yehuda forbids the marriage of a convert with a mamzeret, meaning that he disagrees with Rabbi Yossi's position, and he's and indeed, as we saw earlier, that he's the one who says that a convert is with a mamzeret, and so maybe this is going to be talking about that situation. Midi gerbe mamzeret katani. First of all, we already learned that, and kol ha'asurin lavo b'kal katani, and we said it's all. So it can't just be talking about one of the categories. It's got to be talking about all of the categories. So that doesn't work either. So Amar Rav Yehuda. So now Rav Yehuda offers the following second explanation as we turn to Ayin Daled Amud Bet. Hachikamar. This is what the Mishnah is trying to tell us. Kol hasurin lavo b'kal kahuna, anybody who's prohibited to marry a kohen. So my ninhu. So what is those situations that a person can't marry a kohen? Giyoris pechusa mibas shalosh shanim v'yom echad. A female convert below the age of 3 years in a day. Udulo Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Mutaran lavo zebezet. So what we're going to add in is that we have to be saying not like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says if the convert is sufficiently young, we do not paskin like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, but if the convert is sufficiently young, then we would say that we would allow that convert to marry a Kohen. Because any kind of relationships that she had would not have been relevant for in terms of creating making her not appropriate to marry a Kohen, and therefore Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says she can marry a Kohen. But the other position in that debate is that it doesn't make a difference the age, and again, that's the way we paskin. Doesn't make a difference the age. A convert, female convert's not allowed to marry a Kohen. And so now that we said that, maybe they were talking about who can marry a Kohen. And so when he says v'nokma, and so when we say that the Mishnah is telling us is that a convert is not allowed to marry a Kohen, and she is allowed to marry a mamzer and a dotin. And so, and when Rabbi Yehuda forbids that, again, that's consistent with Rabbi Yehuda's position that a convert is not allowed to marry a mamzer. And so, as a result, that would work. That would potentially work. The problem is that our discussion and our definition of these categories is much broader because the Nokma, well, first of all, the Gemara is going to ask, well, one second, why exclude Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai by this answer? First, the Nokma b'bas shalosh shanim b'yom echad ba'afilu Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Why not say that it's true even for Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai? Meaning, why not allow that this to work for him as well? Because im kain mitzida tabra, we'll see that there's going to be a problem on the side. How? Elatama debas shalosh shanim v'yom echad. Because what's the reason with respect to the child who's 3 years is because of her age. If she was under 3 years, demuteris levo b'kal kahuna, she would be allowed to marry a kohen, and therefore she would be asura lavo zebezeh. She would be thereby prohibited to marry the other people. But hare pechusa mibas shalosh shanim b'yom echad Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai demuteris levo b'kal kahuna umuteris levo zebezeh. But from Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai's perspective, he does not hold of Rabbi Yehuda's position that says that a convert cannot marry a mamzer, and so that would undermine the principle, because our Mishnah said that those who can marry a Kohen or can marry the whatever congregation we're going to be talking about, but in this case a Kohen, those who can marry a Kohen can't marry a mamzeret, and those who can't marry a Kohen can marry a mamzeret. But that doesn't work with respect to a convert under the age of 3, because she would be, obviously when she grows up, would be allowed to marry, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, both a Kohenet and a mamzeret. And so as a result, both a Kohen and a mamzer. So as a result, that doesn't work for us. So as a result, we're going to go back to just saying that maybe the answer, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is that we're talking about not according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai's position, and we're going according to the position that a female convert, whatever the age, is not going to be able to marry a Kohen, and therefore we're saying is able to marry a mamzeret. And Rabbi Yehuda would disagree and say, no, she can't marry a mamzeret. Well, im kain, so in that second, uchlalahu, but one second, is the rule true? Meaning when we said to kol ha'asurim lavo b'kal, that anybody who's unable to marry into the community, and now we're talking about the community of kohanim, b'kal kahuna, mutarin lavo b'zeh b'zeh, that they would be allowed to marry one another, because harei almana ugrusha v'chalala v'zona. We have a whole bunch of people who are not allowed to marry a kohen, but are also to asurin lavo b'kal kahuna. They all can't marry a kohen, namely a widow, divorcee, a chalala, and a zona. They all are not allowed to marry a kohen, but they also can't marry a mamzer, a nosten, a shtuki, and an asufi. So that doesn't work. Besu hamutter aser. And also the implication of the opening statement of our Mishnah, the Tanakama, is that if you are allowed to marry these different kohen if you're in a category that can marry a kohen, then you would not be allowed to marry a mamzer. But v'harei ger shemuter b'kohenet umuter b'mamzeret. But again, we have a category where it's they're able to marry a kohenet and able to marry a mamzeret, and that is a ger. So that doesn't work. So we now go to answer number 3. So answer number 3 is from Rav Natan bar Hoshia. And Ella Amar Rav Natan bar Hoshia Hachikamer. This is what the Mishnah is trying to tell us. Here we go. Kol shekohen aser lisa et bito. Anybody who, who's in a relationship where the kohen would not be allowed to marry that daughter, then that person, the father, that person is going to be allowed to marry one another, but not allowed to come into the community of Israel. Umaynihu, what's the situation? Gershin Gioris. We're talking about one convert married to another convert. Ukadu Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov. And it's like Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov, because Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov says that the daughter of converts is forbidden to marry a Kohen only if both parents are converts. And so here, Rebbe Yehuda would say, no, she's forbidden to marry a Kohen, even if just the father is a convert. So, and mutar and lavo zeh. And so those people are able to marry a converts, mamzerim, nesinim, and shtukim, and asufim, are all able to marry one another. And that's the point. So that seems to work. At least it works on its face. But uklalahu, but is it a general rule that really applies across the board? Because the kol shekohen aser lisa eskbito mutarin lavo zeh. Is it really true that anyone whose daughter would be prohibited to marry a kohen would be allowed to marry one another? Because harei chalal shenasa bas Yisrael, if you had a chalal, an already unkosher kohen, who is the product of a kohen and a divorcee, or the descendant of a chalal himself, so then that chalal, even if he's married to a daughter of Yisrael, the kohen also lisa bito, a kohen is not allowed to marry that the daughter of that relationship between the chalal and a Yisraelite, but v'asurin nami lavo zeh b'zeh, that same chalal is not allowed to marry a mamzer, and so as a result, we still have a problem. So lo kashya karebi dostai ben Yehuda. Maybe we could say that that this Mishnah follows Rabbi Dostai ben Yehuda, and so that's the situation. And Rav Natan would be, and we can still use Rav Natan's answer, because Rabbi Dostai ben Yehuda says that actually, remember, the daughters of Israel constitute a mikvah, a purifying force that allow a chalal and a Yisraelite to have a daughter who is allowed to marry a Kohen, and so the situation would not include that relationship. So v'harei chalal shenasa chalala. But once again, you still have a problem, because now, what about the case of a chalal who marries a chalala? In that situation, even Rabbi Dostai would say that the daughter can't marry a Kohen. The Kohen also lisa bito. The Kohen's not allowed to marry that daughter. V'aser nami lavo zeh b'zeh. And yet, the chalal, the father of such a daughter, still can't marry a mamzer or a natin, or an asufi, or a shtuki. The two, hamutter asur. And moreover, those who can marry a kohen, you're going to tell me that they are prohibited to marry a mamzer? We have the case of the harei ger shenasa bas Yisrael, the case of a convert who married the daughter of Yisrael. The kohen mutter lisabito. So a kohen's allowed to marry the daughter of that relationship. Umutarin lavo zeh b'zeh. And again, a convert is allowed to marry a mamzer. So we have a problem. So we go to answer number 4. Ella Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabbi Baravua. So Hakam Mamzer Ma'acho so Umamzer Me'eshes Ish Ikabenaihu. No, what we're dealing with is a qualification of the laws, a debate about the laws of mamzerut. That according to the Tanakama, whether you have an illegitimate child from a sister, where the punishment is kares, or an illegitimate child from a married woman, where the punishment is death by the hands of Beit Din. In both situations, the Tanakama will say that both categories are a mamzer, and therefore they're not allowed to marry into the Jewish people, but they are allowed to marry one another. Where Tanakama Savar Afilu Mamzer Malchoto Nami Havi Mamzer, the both categories are considered a mamzer. Rabbi Yehuda Savar Me'eshes Ish Havi Mamzer. So as a result, only one of the two categories is a mamzer, and so therefore, we would say that according to the Tanakama, so all of them are allowed to marry one another, and they're not allowed to marry into Israel. So that fits with the Tanakama statement, and it fits with the Rabbi Yehuda statement, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, they're not allowed to marry each other, and so as a result, that's what he's saying is prohibited. But the problem is, my Kamashmalan, what are you teaching? Tanina, we already have all of this already in another Mishnah, because Ezahu Mamzer, who's considered a Mamzer? What does the Mishnah teach us? We saw this Mishnah in Yevamos, Daf Mem Tet Amud Aleph, where it says, who's considered a Mamzer? Kol Shahu below Yavo. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says it doesn't make a difference what the prohibition is, whether it's a lav, a kares prohibition, or a misa prohibition. All of them are going to result in a mamzer. And Shimon Hatimni says, no, kol shechayv and alav kares bidei shemayim v'halacha kidvarav, that only those who are subject to kares or worse, namely the death penalty at the hands of court, so then that's who's going to be considered a mamzer. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, and Rabbi Yeshua says, no, kol shechayvim alav misas based in. No, it's anybody who is chayiv only at the hands of the court. Only that person is going to be a subject to being a mamzer. So we have the three opinions, and again, the halacha is in fact like the Mishnah tells us that it's like Shimon Hatimni, and so. But the bottom line is we already learned this debate, so we don't need it to teach us that. So as a result, we come up with a fifth and final answer to our situation, and it may actually, on some level, be the least satisfactory, because we're going to eliminate the debate between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. Ela Amarava Ger Amoni Umoavi Ika Benaihu. That actually, what the difference is that we're talking about a ger, a convert who is from the nations of Ammon and Moab, meaning that this is somebody who is never going to be allowed to marry into the Jewish people, but they've still converted. So Vahagikamer, and this is what it's saying: Kol hasurim lavo b'kahal umaynihu geramoni umoavi. That who is it that we're saying is a prohibition that can't marry into the community? We're talking about a convert who's from Ammon or Moab. Umutar and lavo zebezeh, but they would be allowed to marry one another. Well, 1 second. Ihachi my Rabbi Yehuda oser. How could Rabbi Yehuda forbid that? Of course, it's got to be permitted. So Hachikamer. This is what the Mishnah is telling us. It's actually not a debate at all. Afal Pisha Rabbi Yehuda Oser Ger Mamzeret, that even though when it says Rabbi Yehuda Oser, it's that even though Rabbi Yehuda forbids a regular convert from marrying a mamzeret, Hani Mili Ger Deroy Lavobakal. That is only with respect to a convert who is able to marry a Kohen, a Yisrael, or a Levi. But about Ger Amoni Moavi, the Ein Ruin Lavobakal low. But a ger, a convert who is from the either Ammon or Moab, that person would be allowed to marry a mamzeret. And so that is the debate that would exist in connection with this issue. And so the point is that it's not actually a debate. The Tanakama and Rebbe Yehuda would agree, and the point is Rebbe Yehuda would just disagree with the Tanna Kama with respect to a ordinary convert marrying a mamzeret. That is where Rebbe Yehuda would disagree. But in other situations, or where it's not an ordinary convert, it's a convert who's from the Ammon or Moab nation, well, then they would be allowed to marry. He would agree to Rebbe Yossi that kind of convert could marry a mamzeret. Now, where are we? So we have been talking about problems of lineage, but as I hinted to and noted that we would talk tomorrow, this is where we're going to begin. Even a woman who has relations with a prohibited category can herself become disqualified due to that relationship. So as a result, for more on that, please stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. Wish everybody a fabulous and wonderful day.
Yasher Clark, Rabbi.
Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Sure.